Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Saturday, February 15th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 196 days, the game against Michigan in 287 days. If you are planning your next event, you should make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at gratefulgriddleoh.com. All right, we normally spend these shows talking about Ohio State football or Ohio State basketball. Today, we're going to be talking about Ohio State football and maybe some Ohio State basketball. There is a new podcast on the Buckeye Huddle podcast network. I am super excited. It is one I've been talking to this guy for months and months and months about this, and it's like, all right, when can we get this to happen? When can we get this to happen? It has finally happened. The show is Buckeye Banter. The host is Seth Shaner. Seth, welcome to the team, first of all. But second of all, I guess but for people who maybe don't know you, let people know a little bit about your background. I think you and I might have been at Ohio State at the same time. You know, it's a very small school. I'm sure we were in lots of classes together, whatever. But let people know a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I attended Ohio State from the fall of 97 through spring 01, and I was with student radio. I was one of two guys who came in as basically freshmen, but then several of the guys on student radio graduated from that 97-98 school year, and then all of a sudden there were just us two sophomores then, and Brian Rozak was his name, and he and I just kind of took over the sports staff for 3 whole years, and we got to do Ohio State football, basketball. He did ice hockey, I did basketball, and we did Ohio State baseball games as well. I mean, we did, I went to the Final Four in 99, I went to the Sugar Bowl in 98 for the 98 season. We did, the Super Regional in 99 that was held there at Ohio State with that really good Ohio State baseball team. And I was at the 02 title game working for Suburban News. So I continued doing that and kind of covering Ohio State from that perspective as well. So, and I do remember you, especially your time, you were working with Channel 4, but I think, were you at the Lantern as well, I think?
Yeah, I was a sports editor of the Lantern for, I covered baseball. I was the baseball beat writer in the spring of 2000 and the Lantern sports editor in the summer and fall of 2000, yes.
Yeah, so we would have rubbed elbows quite a bit then over at Bill Davis Stadium. And I do remember seeing you then, and then you and Shed kind of coming to different events, covering sports around Columbus too. So yeah, I was familiar with you. And, for as far as background and what that means for this show, and I didn't realize this till later, but it's actually the third show of this type that I'm putting together. And one of them is local to Clintonville and Worthington. It's kind of a local, it's called the Spotlight on Stories. It's for the Clintonville Spotlight newspaper. I do a show for them, but then I do a Cincinnati Reds show as well on the riverfront down in Cincinnati. And that's where this was kind of born, of talking to former players, talking to people who work around the franchise of the Reds, but the program up here in Columbus is that idea. But later on, I got to thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? I grew up watching Up Close, okay, on ESPN, Gary Miller, but Roy Firestone, of course, initially, and Chris Myers as well. And I like that long form interview situation, and you really get to talk to people. I'm not going to be a jerk and try to dig up some bad negative story about them, but I am going to ask some tough questions sometimes. And I find it fascinating to see what they say and what they remember, because we as fans remember things a certain way, right? And I'm supposed to talk to Donnie Nicky soon, and I was on the field. I don't know if you were there at the 02 title game. We got to go down with 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and of course that goes double overtime. I look back later, we're on the field for almost an hour of game time, and I remember what that felt like, and what it felt like when you saw the flag, or when the game was won and we rushed out on the floor of the field. And I wonder, hey, what did it feel like to be a player in that circumstance? So I'm excited to ask those kind of questions and see that.
Yes, I was not. I was the low man on the totem pole, so I was the guy back at the NBC affiliate in Columbus,
okay,
sort of monitoring things from afar. I did not get to do the fun stuff.
If it makes you feel better, I did pay my own way.
Yeah, there you go. Well,
I was with Suburban News, very small organization. They allowed me to get the free press pass, and that was the extent of what was given to me for that trip. But it's right here. I've got the front page up on the wall. I did a full 2-page spread and then a few other sidebar articles, and got a lot out of that. We did it from a Columbus angle. So I remember talking to Mayor Coleman. I saw him in the stadium, and Steve Tovar at the time was an assistant coach at Upper Arlington, but I ran into him, got to talk to him. I talked to Lawrence Funderburk, who he and Jimmy Jackson had come from the Kings to watch the game. And so we hit it with a lot of Columbus angle, but I had a really good time covering that event.
Yeah, and the guys from that era it's kind of nice because, guys who are currently in the program, everyone's a little concerned about saying anything a little too, hey, maybe this is going to rub someone the wrong way, maybe this is going to get out and be misinterpreted, whatever. When guys have been out a little longer, that you can talk a little more freely about your memories, and you get, that even the stories that were serious back then are kind of a little bit funny now in some cases. So I think that's one thing that's really nice about talking to guys who've been out of the program a little while. And there's also a little bit of nostalgia there because these are guys who played in, there have been many golden eras of Ohio State football, and kind of over the last 30 years, I think people have sort of spent a lot of time going, boy, I bet this is as good as it gets following Ohio State football. And then, and then the Cooper era goes, and then it's the Trestle era. It's like, oh, I bet this is as good as it gets. And then the Trestle era goes, and it's the Urban Meyer. It's, I bet this is as good as it gets. And, and then now they've won another national championship in the last couple of weeks. So, there's plenty of good memories for all of these guys. But I do like that element of this where your first show, it went up already. We're going to have that. We'll put that up on, I'm going to put the full episode up by the time you listen to this. I will have already put the full episode up on the Buckeye Weekly podcast feed just to let you guys hear that. And, you can, of course, find the full show on Buckeye Banter. Just search Buckeye Banter wherever you find Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning and Buckeye Weekly and all the other Buckeye Huddle podcasts. But I think that's one of those really fun things is with a little bit of time, you can look back and there's a little bit of a different perspective probably from some of these guys on some of these stories and stories that probably would not have come out if you were talking to these guys 25 years ago, 30 years ago. Now, you can just kind of what's it going to hurt? The real story behind the story.
Yeah. And what is it Ryan Day said very recently? The story will be told. And he said that before they won the title. So if we win the title, there's a story that can be told. And I know some folks inside the room during that players only meeting. I know some of the story, but I don't even think now it's going to be told quite with as much vigor as it will be told probably 20 years from now. And I hope to hit multiple eras. There's such a vast reservoir. Talking to Greg Belisari the other day, just of even folks who stuck around and stayed here in the Columbus area. We see folks around town all the time and the things you and I do, I'm sure. I want to hit multiple eras. I mean, I'd love to talk to as many of that 1996 Rose Bowl team as possible. We will do that in good time. I don't want to do all of them at once because, hopefully we can hit some different eras and talk to some different folks and really tell people's story. And your network here is already showing me that there's a vast group of people that love Ohio State athletics, which I already knew, but seeing your channels and who all is following what you folks are putting out, that's really exciting to me that people can hear those stories as well.
Yeah, and we cover a lot of different stuff, and we do we do a lot of the week to week, day to day stuff, and obviously the game coverage and all that kind of stuff. The first time you approached me about this, it was like, oh man, this is like a great fit because this is something we don't do. We just don't have time to go back and do like the retrospective stuff. I did like one historical thing before the national championship game with the 1935 Ohio State Notre Dame game, but generally that's stuff that's really interesting. But it's just like, I don't have time. And that's everyone. Mark has his recruiting stuff, and we got our X's and O's guys, all that stuff. We do this whole thing at the end of every show. This is one of these things that we haven't had a chance to really add to the network. So I thought this is a really, really exciting, good fit. And we were, as you mentioned, Donnie Nicky, there was stuff that I was immediately like, oh, I hope he asks him about this. I hope, because there's all sorts of different stuff. Because it's like, he was he was the guy who touched the ball that Ken Dorsey kind of flung out there at the very end of that thing. And it's like, that's one thing you could talk to him about. But, there's all sorts of different angles to his career. And he started as a really young guy and took some heat from fans. Now, that probably is very different from the way guys are taking heat from fans now, but it's kind of going to be interesting to hear that perspective on things. And I mean, a million other things as well. So yeah, I'm really, really interested in that. I also did want to talk to you about Jim Trestle because earlier in the week, Tony and I did a show about, a bunch of different things, a couple different things. One of them was like, hey, by the way, Jim Trestle is now the lieutenant governor of Ohio. And, as Tony and I obviously had our own individual stories about, behind the scenes and Jim Trestle and what Jim Tressel's really like. You obviously having been at Ohio State at the same time, sort of, and in the Columbus media sphere at the same time, I'm guessing have your own sort of Jim Trestle story. So I figured the floor is yours. What's a good Jim Trestle story?
So this goes back to basically my senior year. He was hired, right, in the wintertime. Everybody knows the 310 days. A lot of people might forget, though, the press conference. It was one of the first ones I remember being held in the newly renovated area of the Ohio Stadium. And he was there, and he did his press conference, and a lot of us kind of got to talk to him off to the side a little bit. Side note, I remember a certain local morning show personality that was making a bit of a scene, which was kind of weird. That was just all weird. Of course, he made the 310-day speech, but I want to tell you a little bit about like my experiences as time went on. That was only a few weeks before signing day. All right. And he comes in, gets his class together. Some of it had already been cultivated by the previous staff, and some of it, though, he added. And he comes to the Woody Hayes for the press conference on the day of signing day. And again, he's only been there about a month, right, at this point. And there were at least 20 or 21 recruits, if I remember correctly. And we sat in the team room, the meeting room where they would be sometimes. And the press was able to sit up in the seats, almost theater style. And he stood down in front. And Tom, he talked about each of the 21 players, 0 note cards, 0 notes, just knew all their phys ed teachers and whomever else he wanted to talk about. Lydell Ross sticks out to me in what he talked about Lydell. I mean, it just was amazing to me. Here's a guy that's only been here 4 weeks, and he's already telling us about all this. There was an interaction with some reporters that I found funny because it was a polar opposite of what John Cooper, how he would handle some questions. But then the thing that got me was this. In the spring practice area, they had a lunch out at the Ohio State golf course, which they always did that with John Cooper at the beginning of the week during the season. So they had a lunch, and it was a pre-spring get-together with the media. And Steve Snapp, the sports information director at the time, was throwing up a huge stone wall with us students. And he would not allow me to have an interview with Coach Trestle. And we wanted to have him come on our weekly talk show. It's called Bucks on Bucks because the fictitious name of the student station was K-Bucks, B-U-X. All right. And so the sports show was Bucks on Bucks. We did it every Monday night. And I said, Steve's not letting me talk to him. I don't understand. We'd love to have him on. The students want to hear from him. So in the course of this luncheon, as we were leaving, I stepped up to Coach Trestle and I said, Coach, here's what I represent. Here's what I do. We'd love to have you on the talk show we do every Monday night. He says, write down your number, write down the exact time you want me to call, and I'll call. And it wasn't 30 seconds past whatever it was. I gave him 7:01, 7:05 or whatever. We got the show started. He calls in. He gave us like 35 minutes. Doesn't have to do that, right? And that was just who he was at the time and who I valued him to be. And the last thing I'd say, it's not as big a deal, but I graduated. I didn't really have a full-time job yet. I was working overnights at 610 WTVN and AM 1230 producing Reds games and some other things. And I saw an opening in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for some form of an assistant. Now, later on, I'd learned that job was actually really, really, really important because it was basically Jim Trestle's executive assistant who was also tying in recruits and things like that. It would have been, it took a very special person to do that job. But when I saw the word assistant, I thought, hey, maybe I could do something like that. But I couldn't get the thing to work on trying to apply. And I still had Jim Trestle's email address from when we had conversed back and forth. And it's late at night. I sent him an email. And 5 minutes later, Jim Trestle responded and directed me where I could apply. Now, he knows I'm not getting that job, but he was willing to do that. And I just found some of your stories resonated with me because, that's who he was. And that's not the seedy side of politicians, but that is very politician-like to me. The attention to detail and knowing who your public is and that kind of thing.
Well, there you go. So there's a little bit of a, stories from that era of Ohio State football. But if people want to hear from the folks who were playing at Ohio State in that era on the Buckeye Banter podcast, Seth, let them know where they can follow you on Twitter, where they can find where they can find the show, and of course, it's on our YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, the Buckeye Huddle YouTube channel. It's been very kind to me already with the downloads and the views. That's been great. We are set up across all audio platforms as well, just under Buckeye Banter, and it'll be under my name, Seth Shaner. Right now, I am at Twitter at ShanerBomb, all one word, and that's where I'll be releasing information about guests and things like that as of now, and we'll have more information, I'm sure, as we get moving along. This has been a very organic launch, so it's kind of like, hey, we're going to do things as we go, and I'm fine with that because it's been very exciting.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on the team now. As I said, I think this is something that really fits the network pretty well. It's something that there's not a lot of overlap with what we do right now, and it's something that we have had people sort of say, hey, it would be great if you guys could do like a Where Are They Now kind of thing. And it's like, that would be great. That would involve free time. But now we have someone who has time to actually do it and do it well. So very excited to have Seth on the network, have the Buckeye Banter podcast on the network. Go ahead and search Buckeye Banter wherever you find the Buckeyes TomOrrow Morning podcast or the Buckeye Weekly podcast. You can just add that, subscribe to that there. And you can, again, find it on our YouTube channel, again, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Going to be a lot of fun shows coming. This is like great, all-time great off-season content for sure. Going to be good during the season as well. But when, off-season content like this is the perfect time to launch this kind of thing. So really excited to have that all on the network. Also, you can find Seth at BuckeyeHuddle.com. He's on our board there as well. I'm sure we'll have lots of conversations about these conversations on the Huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. That's all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.